Hey guys, it's Lil One. Today's video is about helping people who switch from FL Studio to Cubase and show them the basics and basically how you can apply features from FL Studio to Cubase. If you're not switching from FL Studio but Cubase is your first DAW you try, this video is still useful for you as I'm gonna go through all the basics and show you how you can create a song using very useful features. I'm gonna put on the screen the different topics I'm gonna talk about in this video, so you can see if there is some specific point you want to know right away. And I will also put in the video description the timestamps so you can navigate between the chapters. So with that being said, let's dive into it. The first difference is when you open the software. So for FL Studio, when you run it, you always land on this blank project. And if you want to create a new project, you just have to go in File and Save, and then you just name your project whatever you want and you click on Save. But for Cubase we have more steps, so this is what you will see when you first run the software. This is a kind of launcher where you have the news on the left and on the right you have like your project. So what is interesting for us is this area here. So this is what you will have to work with when you want to create a new project. So there is two things we have to check. The first one is where the project folder will be created. Here it is always set up by default to your default Cubase project folder. For me it's this one. And then you have to name your project folder. So to summarize, you have the global folder where you will have all your projects, and then you have your project folder name here. So let's do it. I'm gonna keep the global project folder the same, but I'm gonna name this one test for video, for example. And then you click on create empty and you will land on the blank template. Now this is not finished, we have one more step. So now that we have created the folder for the project, we actually have to create the file for the project. So in order to do that, you go in File, and same thing as for FL Studio, you click on Save, and then you give a name for the project. So usually I go like the same name as the folder project, so test for video. And now you have your project file saved. The second difference is probably the biggest difference. As you can probably tell, Cubase interface is very different from FL Studio interface. I mean, you still have like the mixer and the playlist, arrangement, window view, whatever you call it, but a big part of the workflow is different. So this is how FL Studio arrangement window looks like. You already have all the lines pre-named, and you basically can just draw a pattern and boom, and you can move whatever you want in whatever line you want super easily. This is not how it works in Cubase. In Cubase you don't have anything at all from the start. There is no line pre-ready or anything. You have to create everything yourself. Another thing that you have to keep in mind is you have to specify what kind of content you want to put in every track. So if you want to add a new track, you have to click here in this empty area, and you will have like a big menu of everything you can think of. So if you want to add like an audio track, a VST, MIDI signal, anything, even effect, group, folder, ruler. So let's say I'm adding an audio track, and then you have like another window where you have to specify even more information, which is basically what input you want for this audio track. Usually it is the input of your audio interface. Then you have the configuration. You have to say, is it gonna be mono or stereo? Then you have the output, and you just have to name it, like let's say test audio track And here you go, you have your first audio track. Okay, let's add other tracks. So I want a VST, I want Vital, which is a great VST. Let's say I want another instrument. I'm gonna load expand. As you can see, for every track I added, it also added a mixer track for every track. So this is also a different thing in Cubase, which is that every track is already linked to a new mixer track. It's not like in FL Studio where you have to link yourself every element you want to link. Here everything is automatic and every track has its own mixer track. So here I can see this is my audio, this is my VST, this is my other VST. Now let's draw some pattern. One for here, one for here, and let's record a simple audio. This is a test recording for the video. Okay, so now let's see how it actually works. So like I said, we have different type of tracks and we can't really mix them up. So if I try to drag and drop the audio in the VST line, I can't. Basically, I cannot mix an audio signal and a MIDI signal. This is one of the main differences between FL Studio and Cubase. This might sound a bit annoying, but if you think about it, that will make your project so much more clean. Because if everything has its own place, you won't have like samples here, samples there, and mix everything and at the end have a big mix and twist of everything and you can't even recognize what sample is this, what sample is this. And this is the same thing for the mixer actually. Because every track is already linked to a mixer, you don't have to be careful to link every element to a mixer like you would do in FL Studio. So this is also a big advantage. For this third point, I want to cover the mixer part. So here in FL Studio, you have the mixer, so you have a ton of mixer that you can link to every element you want basically. You can link your VST to any mixer rack as you want. And you basically have two ways to add effects. The first way is using insert, which is this part here. You can add whatever you want and that will directly affect the original sound. Another way of applying effects is using sends. So basically I have this reverb effect in another rack, and if I want this specific rack to run through the reverb, I just have to go here in this track, right click here, and I can send this signal here, and basically this will control the amount of signal I send into the reverb. But this doesn't affect my original sound because I'm basically sending out the signal to another rack. This is what we call this a send. So as you can see, this is very simple. We have everything in the same place. The racks, the sending features, everything is here in this window. Now when we move to Cubase, this is a little bit different. We basically have the mixer divided in three main parts that you can browse through with those buttons here. So this is the first menu, the first part, which is basically where you will have your faders and your meters here. You can also control the mute, the solo, and other stuff that is not very important for now. The second part is where you will put your effect as an insert. So if we choose here, we can add a compressor, for example, and your sound will be directly affected by the compressor. The third part is where you can have the sends. So you just have to click here and choose a send. I don't have a send yet, I will create one. So when you want to create a send, you actually have to right click here and create an effect track. So here I'm gonna load reverb. And this reverb will have its own mixer rack, like here. I can control its volume here, I can mute it, I can solo it, and here I have the effect. So now if we go back to send and we go in the VIII, for example, we will have here the list of the sends available, which are basically the effect tracks available. And then if we choose reverb and activate it, we will have our signal going through reverb. And we can control the amount of signal we send by moving this value here from the left to the right. Let's go on another big topic, which is sample packs management, or at least samples. In FL Studio, you have to go in settings, file, and you have to set all the paths for all your sample folders. Then, when you go on the menu, you can see all your packs. Here, you can just go in it and basically drag and drop. Easy. Now in Cubase, as you can guess, it is not easy. It is not intuitive. So you first have to know that Cubase is working with a tool called Media Bay, and Media Bay is basically the sample manager of Cubase, and you have to deal with this tool if you want to bring your files in the project. So how to do it? You have to go in Media Bay, and here you basically have to find your path, or at least you have to indicate Media Pool what path is your sample folder. So you might have a little different thing because I already set my path and folders, but let's imagine I don't have anything set. So I know my folder for the samples is in my D drive, in the folder pack. So I'm going this computer, D drive, pack, here. So here what you need to do is to check the folder that you want to add. I'm not gonna check it because it's gonna uncheck it and it's gonna reset my path, but basically just check it and it will add it. If you wanna make sure you actually get the files, you can right click on it and rescan disk, or at least quick rescan. Once you check it, it should add the path in the media pool so you can easily access it. If you also want to have it like quickly accessible, you can right click on it and add favorite. So when you go in favorites, you have this here, easy to access, but you should only go in this window to add a path. If you actually want to use the samples added, there is a better way than going in the media pool and checking all the paths. You can use the right panel. If you don't see anything, you have to activate it. Here, boom. You might appear in the VSTI tab. You just have to click on media, and now what you want to do is file browser, and boom. Here you will have a very easy access to all your files. So if you want these loops, for example, and then you have all the loop here, easy to access and easy to drag and drop. Also, you have to keep in mind when you add a new file in the sample folder, you actually have to rescan it sometime because it doesn't detect the new file. So you just have to go again in Media Bay, and basically you have to find the folder and right click on it and rescan disk. This will take a few seconds and boom, you will have your files. Now we're gonna see how to reverse a sample, which is a very useful feature. In FL Studio it is very simple. You double click on the sample and here you have the reverse thing. If you check it, easy, your sample is reversed. Now in Cubase this is not as easy to find it, but it is still pretty simple to do it. So there is two ways actually. So the first way is what I'm using usually. So if you just click one time, nothing will happen. If you double click, this menu will change for something different, and here you will see this thing, and if you click on process, you have this category add process, and here you can see the list, and you have reverse. This will reverse your sample. The other way is to select the sample, to go in audio, processes, and you will find the same list here. Here is a little tip about when you want to solo and mute a track. So in FL Studio you can basically unselect tracks if you want to mute them. If you want to solo one track, you right click and it will solo only this track, and if you right click again on the same, it will put everything back. But you can also right click and left click to add other to the solo one. In Cubase this is pretty much the same thing, but it has a kind of different approach. So let me show you. The first thing you need to know is this is where you will control the muting and the solo. So the M is for mute, the S is for solo. If I want to solo this track, I just click on it and it will automatically mute the other tracks in the project. Now if I mute the exact same track, it will mute this one and it will unmute the other ones. Now what you can do is you can actually mute all what you want, like this, and there is nothing playing, but you can also solo every single track, like just like this. Very simple. Another thing to know is you can actually control the whole tracks right here. So if you click on this button, you will deactivate all solo states, and if you click on this one, you will deactivate all mute states. So if I want to have everything back on, like no solo anymore, I just have to click on the S and everything will be on the previous state, which was muted. And if I click on muted, boom, back to original. Now you might ask, how do we solo only one track like in FL Studio with the right click? Well, this is pretty much the same. So here obviously, like in FL Studio, if you left click, you will just add the solo track to the previous one. If you right click, it won't work. It is not like in FL Studio. So you actually need to use a key for this trick. So you need to press the Ctrl key and to left click on what you want to do. So let's say the first one, solo. Okay, this is the same as if we only left click on it. But now let's say the second one, Ctrl plus left click. Only the middle one is solo. Let's try on the third one. Only the third one. But this trick doesn't work for the mute. If I try to do the same, Control, it won't solo the mute. So here, if you just want to mute one track, you have to click on it to deactivate all mutes and click on what you want. Let's cover the sample tempo synchronization part. Let's see how you can do it in FL Studio. So now we have a drum loop of 120 BPM, but the project is 153. Now let's synchronize the sample to the project tempo. So if you double click on the sample and you go on time, if you right click on time and you select auto detect and then you go in type in BPM, here you have to type the BPM of the sample. So it is 120 BPM, and this should synchronize your sample to the project tempo. Let's hear now. Wait, let's hear before actually. This is terrible. Let's fix this. Auto detect, BPM. Let's hear now. Actually, we also have to not forget about the mode. So because we stretch it, we need to change the mode, otherwise we will have the formant shifting thing, and this is not good at all. So usually we use the if3 generic, and now let's hear the result. In Cubase you have 3 steps. The first step is to activate the musical mode. You can do this by clicking on this button here, and this will basically adapt the sample tempo to the tempo here you entered, or the default tempo which is already entered when you add the sample to the project. But usually when this is set by default, this is not the original tempo here. As you can see, this is not 120, so we have to modify it. And one other thing to keep in mind is when you get the wrong one, usually when you click on the musical mode, it will basically put the sample in the bars. So here it put the sample right at the end of the bar. Sometimes it can works when your sample is already cut perfectly when it has to end, but here in this example I took a tail on purpose to see how it can fuck up your thing. So if we take a look, we can see that at the end we actually have the kick and the crash, which are the tail of the sample. So actually it should end here on the bar, but it ends here because of the tail. If we take a look at it, and if we look at it with the metronome on, this is completely offbeat. So first, let's change the tempo. So we have to set it to 120 BPM. And right here we already have something that looks like very right on the grid. But we have one more step before, which is the mod. So remember in FL Studio we had the mod to change the format, the pitch variation, which is caused when you stretch a sample. So here we have to do the same. In Cubase, to change the mod, you have to go in algorithm here. And when you click on it, you will have the list of everything. And you have a lot of algorithm. I usually go for Elastic Pro for pitch because this is the one that will keep the original pitch and try to also keep the quality of the sample. So I would suggest try this one, and if you really don't have a good quality, you can experiment with other one, but you should always go for this one, I think, first. So let's hear now. Let's see now how to stretch a sample. So in FL Studio, you actually have to go here in this section and click on stretch, and when you do so and you actually drag a sample, you will actually stretch it. So let's say I want this last thing to be right here on the grid, like this. And that will stretch the sample. If you don't select stretch, it will just make it bigger, but not modifying the time, the tempo. In Cubase, the feature is a bit hidden. You actually have to go here. Even if you already have the arrow, you have to click again on the arrow. And that will bring you a new menu. And you can see normalize sizing. This is your normal arrow. And you can also see sizing applies time stretch. So let's say if I don't select this one, but the normal one, and I try to stretch something, nothing happened because this is already the max length. But if I go the other way, I will just cut it basically. Now if I choose time stretch, I will actually stretch it like this. Let's move on to the effect part, and more precisely the automation clip part. In FL Studio, if you want to automate a parameter, you have one very easy way, which works also for the third-party plugins. So basically you have your plugin, you just have to tweak what you want to automate. So let's say the mix, then you go in tools, last tweaked, create automation clip, and that will create the automation clip in the area I selected, and now I can move like I want. Unfortunately, in Cubase you don't have the same shortcut. You have a lot more steps to do. So let's see. What you want to do first is go on your track here in this area, and you will see a little arrow appearing. It is show hide automation. Click on it and it will add the automation line. Now you need to choose what automation you want to do. So in order to do that, you have to click here, and here we are lucky because we already have what we want, the mix of the VIII vintage verb. But let's say it is not in the list here, so we click on more. And here this is a bit confusing, but let's think about it. So we have an effect in the insert mode, which is the direct effect. So we have to look for insert, which is this thing, ints. And here usually you have the list of all the effects you have in the insert. So we only have this, so let's check it. And here you have all the parameters you can automate. We want to automate the mix, so you click on the mix, okay. And now this line is gonna take care of the mix automation. So now you just have to draw your line. So let's say this will go 0, this will go maximum. Now you can notice this little thing which is not in FL Studio, which is the R thing. So in Cubase you have the read automation and the write automation thing. So the R thing is basically the button that is used to turn on and off your automation. So if I just turn it off, nothing is happening because I turn it off. But if I turn it on again, the W is for write automation. It is basically when you have a MIDI controller, and if you click on it and assign the MIDI signal to this automation, you will be able to draw your automation in live performance. So you can basically record your automation just with a MIDI keyboard, for example, and you just have to click on play, click on write, and when it play and you move your button or fader on the MIDI keyboard, you will have your automation drawn itself. And like for the mute and the solo button, you also have the same buttons here for the whole project. So let's say we have let's say we had 3 automation, and if we click on this, that will turn off all automation, the 3 of them. Now let's talk about the shortcuts. Shortcuts are a big part in the music production workflow because they will speed up a lot your workflow. FL Studio is very famous for having a lot of shortcuts, so I thought it would be interesting to see if we have the same thing in Cubase. Let's start with the selection tool. In FL Studio, whatever tool you have in your hand, you just have to press Ctrl key and move the left click like this, and this is how you can select everything you want. In Cubase this is pretty much the same, except you don't really have to press on Ctrl key, so you can do with or without. So here I'm not pressing anything, just using left click, and I can select what I want. Now if I press Ctrl, this does the exact same thing. Now in FL, if you want to select multiple samples, you have 2 ways of doing it. So either you use the selection tool, so Ctrl plus left click, and you have all what you want. But if you only click instead of selecting, you have to press Ctrl and Shift key at once, and that will add everything. In Cubase this is almost the same, so you can do the selection with only the left click, or you can also use either Ctrl or Shift key to add everything. So here I use Ctrl key, but now I'm gonna use Shift key. In FL Studio, when you want to unselect the clip that you selected, you have to right click somewhere else in the playlist. In Cubase, when you select a clip and want to unselect it, you just have to left click anywhere else in the playlist. In FL Studio, when you want to duplicate a clip, you have three ways. The first way is a simple Ctrl C and Ctrl V, and then you move it where you want. The second way is to hold Shift key and to left click and move where you want to move it. And the third way is to select it, Ctrl C and Ctrl B. That will paste it right after it here. You also have three ways in Cubase. The first way is the same. You select it, Ctrl C and Ctrl V. But here you have to be careful. You have to check two things. First one, which track are you in? Right here, I'm not in the first one. The second one is highlighted, so I'm right now in the second one. If I want to go back in the first track, I have to click here, and now I am in the first track. Second thing to check, the cursor. Here it is at the very beginning, but if I want to paste my duplicate, let's say at the 2, I have to put my cursor at the 2. Now if I press Ctrl V, that will paste it right here. Perfect. Now let's say I didn't check it and my cursor was right here at the beginning. It will paste it on the other one, so I'm making it a bit messy. Now let's see the other case. I was at the 2 but in the wrong track. It will paste it on the wrong track. The second way to duplicate a clip is to hold Alt key and to move your clip where you want. The third way is to select the clip you want to duplicate and press Ctrl D. That will duplicate your clip right after the previous one here. Now let's talk about the piano roll. So first of all, in FL Studio, when you want to work in the piano roll, you have to right click on the VST and click on piano roll. That will open the piano roll window. Now usually when you open the piano roll window, you have the draw tool selected by default, and when you have this thing selected, you can directly draw the note you want to draw. Now if you don't use any key, you will just have the possibility to move your note on a different note. But let's say you want to modify the length of the note, you have to hold Shift, and when you click anywhere, you can actually set your length. If you want to delete notes, this is very easy in FL Studio. You just have to hold right click and you will see this kind of stroke round circle, and if you hover on notes, you will delete them like this. If you select a note and use the arrows on the keyboard, you will just scroll down and up in your piano roll. Now if you hold Shift, you will move your note from half step every time you hit a key. If you press Ctrl, you will go octave by octave. In Cubase, if you want to access the piano roll, you first have to draw a pattern. So let's do it. When you are in this view and you are in the track of your VST, you have to press the Alt key and you will see you will get the draw tool. Now you can use the left click and hold the left click to draw your pattern. Now that you draw your pattern, you have to double click on it and you will get your piano roll. When you open the piano roll, usually you have the arrow tool by default and not the draw tool. But this is not an issue, because you can use the same shortcut that we used to draw the pattern earlier. So let's see, if we hold Alt key, we get again the draw tool. So now let's try to draw some notes. And here we can choose the length, but we cannot modify the pitch of it. If you want to modify the pitch of it, you have to select it, and you can either drag it like this with your arrow tool, but you can also use the keyboard. So if we use the arrow keys without anything else, that will do half step by half step. Now if you press Shift key and use the arrow keys, that will do octave by octave. Now if you want to delete the note, you cannot use the right click because it is used to choose the tools. In Cubase, you actually have to select your note and press the delete key on the keyboard. Or if you want to use the tools, you can select the eraser and click on your note.